Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be able to share this information with you and talk with you about all of the ways that English assessment scores can be used and all of the information that we can garner from an English assessment score. So I'm going to be moving pretty quick today because I have so much information I want to share with you. But generally, I'm going to be talking about a few assessments, the Aptis, and then I'm going to introduce the Lexile Framework for reading, how we link those two assessments. And then once the link is taken care of, or once we have established a solid link, what you can do with that information. And I will close with showing you a few samples of what we have available to educators who have Lexile measures, which you can get through an Aptis assessment. So I imagine all of you are very familiar with the British Council's Aptis test of English language. But just as a reminder, that has four main components: the writing, reading, speaking, and listening, as well as a core grammar and vocabulary. Today, I'm focusing on reading because we've linked the Lexile Framework with reading with the Aptis assessment. When you get when your student, an examinee, it's like they have Aptis assessments for teens as well as adults. When the score report comes in, you get an Aptis score on a scale of 0 to 50, and that's the score that we're really linking to with the Lexile Framework. Aptis also provides a CEFR level. The assessments were designed with CEFR levels in mind, and so all of those assessment items identify or link to a particular CER level. So when all four skills, the writing, speaking, listening, and reading, are taken, you can get an overall CERF level, as well as just when you have an individual assessment such as reading. So this is just an example. Depending on the Aptis test that you're taking or your students are taking, there are different kinds or different proportions of items. So some are really focused on assessing A2 levels versus B1, B2, C1, and also A1. So they have different kinds of skill focuses and the task description, and they're tapping into slightly different cognitive processes. So we have a really nice assessment of reading comprehension here, purposely designed to address different CERF levels. So what we've done is we have this Aptis assessment and we've linked it to the Lexile Framework for reading. And this is where a whole new world of opportunity for using the reading assessment scores comes into play once you link to something, and an auxiliary scale like the Lexile Framework for reading. So the Lexile Framework is a scale that runs from below 0 all the way up to above 2,000. So it's much more fine-grained than either the Aptis scale or certainly the CEFR scale, because they only have a few large-grained levels. So there's really a lot of opportunity within the Lexile Framework to do what you can't quite do with some of the other scales. So it's a system for matching readers and text using the same scale, the Lexile scale. So it's like the CEFR in the sense that if you have an A1 student, you'll probably want to match them with an A1 book until they start moving forward and are able to access A1 books if the publisher has assigned a CEFR level. But like I said, this is more fine-grained. So we would have a student with an example here of 770 Lexiles, and then we have reading materials that are also given a Lexile measure on the same scale. So this one is also 770, and that's what we call a good match. You get a Lexile measure on a student from having the student take a test of reading comprehension or development, such as the Aptis. We get measures for books or just documents from running the text through what we call the Lexile Analyzer, which examines a number of different variables of the text to assign it a Lexile measure. And we have a lot of research documents talking about how we've developed these, but I won't go into that right now. So when you have this, when we know a student's Lexile reading measure and the text measure, we can forecast comprehension. So when we have a student and text match, we can expect that that student's going to be able to access that book. It's going to be challenging. So we have this match level set at a pretty challenging level. There'll be new sentence structures, probably some challenging vocabulary, but it would be good opportunity for growth. If that book proves too challenging, you can always give a student a book with a lower Lexile level. This one down here is probably going to be less challenging. The student will probably know most, if not all, of the vocabulary in that text. Students who really gung-ho or are really interested in a particular topic, you might want to match them with a book that has a higher Lexile measure. But the key point that I want to make sure everyone understands is you have total control and the reader has control. If you know the reader's Lexile measure and you know the Lexile measure of a book, you can adjust that to meet your needs. It's not a fixed system. It's just an informed system. So there are a number of ways we link a test with the Lexile Framework for reading. This is one of the ways, and we use this with some of the Aptis assessments. So I'll just share this with you so you have a basic understanding of how this link occurs. First, what we do is identify a sample of students or an examinees who represent the population of the test that we're linking. So in this case, the Aptis. And then we develop a set of our linking items. We have specific item types that are linked to our framework. And we develop a set of items for the Aptis examinee population to take. Then they take them. They take the Aptis items as well as our items, and we can get a sense of how difficult those are together because we link those assessments and we analyze those test results together from the same students. And then what we can do is we can link the Aptis scale with the Lexile scale. So moving forward, students don't have to take two tests. They just take the Aptis test and they can get a Lexile measure. So once that link has taken place, you'd only have to take the one reading comprehension assessment. You take the Aptis assessment, and we've linked to the whole suite of Aptis assessments here, as you can see. And there's a link over to a translation over to a Lexile measure. So it's basically you're getting the benefit of two scores in one by just taking the one assessment once we've linked. And so what I'm going to share with you is once you have this Lexile measure, there's a lot that you can do with it. And I'm going to run through a number of things that you can do with it. This is going to go lightning fast, but I just want to give you a flavor of it because there really is a lot. So one thing you can do is you can evaluate the text difficulty of the materials that you're using in your classroom. You can, like if you have a national curriculum, you can examine the difficulty progressions of that. And then you can also identify gaps and the need for instructional support. And that can be with textbooks, it could be with a curriculum, it can be with just individual novels that you're teaching. So here's a chart that is the result of the link between our Aptis for Teens assessment. So you can see we have an Aptis scale score. It runs from 0 to 50, and then the Lexile reading measure associated with those. So I highlighted a couple points here. So we see 24 runs up to about 715 Lexile measure, and then the 36 is about 925 Lexile measure. And within that zone on the Aptis assessment, they've identified this zone from 24 to 36 as being a CEFR B1. So we can associate the Lexile measure with the Aptis designated CERF level as well. So you're seeing how this information is just dominoing. We're getting more, snowballing, I should say, getting more and more information. An example of a text progression, we did a study a number of years ago with South Korean textbooks. So these were textbooks approved by the Ministry of Education, and we looked at textbooks, so hundreds of textbooks and more than 1,000 in grade 5 up through grade 12. And I'm going to show you more box plots, and they all are they're the same basically. The middle box here is the middle 50% of the books at that grade level. So that's where 50% of the action is occurring. So the Lexile measures of half of the books in grade 5 are right down here between 100 and 200. But this whisker up at the top goes up to the hardest book and then to the easiest or the lowest Lexile and the highest Lexile. So you can see while the boxes stair step up nicely, there are a lot of books up in these whiskers that overlap, right? So you can see there's quite a lot of variation, and you can see that because the Lexile measure is so fine-grained. We also did this with a number of graded readers. So this is levels 1 through 6 in a graded reader series. And so you can see here in some cases, the Lexile measures of books with the same graded reader level vary quite a lot. And I'm going to move through these quickly. I'm just giving you a flavor of the kind of research that we can do and that we have done at Metametrics and that you can do actually. If you're interested, we'd be happy to work with you if you have text sets that you're interested in, especially if you have representative sets, maybe in Latin America or South America, large groups of text. We'd love to do a study with you. So definitely contact me. We studied a number of graded readers, and you can see that the difficulty of graded readers at different levels is different. So basically, this is just pointing out not all graded reader series are the same. You can see this blue series. It's much harder in terms of Lexile measures than some of the other graded reader series. A lot of graded readers also organize themselves by CEFR level. So we did the same thing. So these are 3 series, all the books that were A1, A2, B1, B2. And again, you can see that there are some graded reader series that are much harder when it comes to a CERF level than others. And if you have a student take an Aptis test or another test of English that is linked to the Lexile measure, you can see how the kids are going to experience this. So we have a 450 Lexile reader, and here's a 450 range, which is in the A1 range. So here, you know, depending on which series they're getting, they're going to have a similar experience. It's all sort of within the same range. But if you go over to this reader who's in the B1 range, if they pick a book from this black series, that's going to be really easy for them. Same with these other red and green. But if they pick a book from the blue series, that might be really challenging for them because the book's level is higher, and in some cases much higher than their reader level. So you can see how you can start having the information of the reader and the text match. So now what I'm going to do is show you some of these text matches. So if you're looking at a larger curriculum now, you can see like this is a student who has a 900 Lexile. Okay, that's within the B1 range. So this student could be in any number of grades. So the Lexile measure is not bounded by grade or age. So a student in grade 9 would have a an experience where they would comprehend every single one of the books in that set. But if that student were in grade 12, they would probably have a lot of comprehension challenge here. And so if this student is in grade 12, you would know you would need to give them a lot of support if they were being taught with a book in this range. So this is how you can really gain an understanding of the support the students need. We did a similar study with US textbooks, so grades 1 through 12. Again, this is a 900 Lexile. That's typical of students in grade 5, 6, 7. But again, we have a lot of students who are up in the upper grades who might have a Lexile measure of 900 and would be very challenged by that, this reading. We did a similar study with UK textbooks. And again, if you're interested in doing this with the Spanish corpus, we would love to do that. So you can look at these are the key stages across the pre-university schooling in the United Kingdom. So by the time the students are getting ready to move on to university, the textbooks that they're encountering are pretty high. Okay, but we also have identified a college and career ready Lexile measure, and this is the difficulty or the range we like students to be in so that they can access materials that are career materials. We've done a lot of work on career readiness, career materials, and college textbook materials. So we would like students to be up here. So if we have a student in the 900 range and they're going into university and they're going to be reading books in this range, they're going to really struggle. And it's good to know that in advance. But if they're up here at the 1300, which is our college and career readiness ranges, or above, ideally, they will have more success in tackling those textbooks. So now I'm going to move into our last few minutes here, showing you, let me just back up a minute and just emphasize, when you have the Lexile measure for text and reader, you have a very powerful information to help you identify where instructional gaps might occur. That can be at a corpus level, like what we did in North Korea and the United States. We gathered textbooks across the country to represent these grade levels. Or you can do it at an individual level, which I'll show you in a minute. But it's really powerful information to help guide your instruction and just prepare for differentiation. So what Metametrics has done is created a web page that is free. So you can go on hub.lexile.com and access this web page. Different capabilities are accessible to different levels of users, but the basic and basic plus, which does require registration, you have access to almost everything I'm going to show you here. Premium is a small fee, and then you have access to everything. So I'm going to show you two tools. One is Find a Book, And Find a Book accesses hundreds of thousands of books. So you can connect students with specific books through their Lexile measure. You can identify gaps. So if you're teaching a particular book, you can look it up and find a book. If you have the Lexile measures for your students, you can create that match, or you can see any gaps that might need support. The student might need support. So when you go into Find a Book, let me go back. If you click on this course card here, or this card, you get to this page. And if you know the title of the book, you can just search there. If you know the student's Lexile measure, or you maybe have a range for your classroom, you can put it in there and search that way. We also have a number of interest features that I don't have time to go into, but you can search by interest category, and we have a number of other ways you can search. I also want to point out that we have a Lexile or a Spanish framework, and so we have a number of books in Spanish that you can search on also. So I chose House on Mango Street, and this is the book information page, or the book details page. And what you see is the author, the Lexile measure of the book. But down here, you also have, in this case, there's Lexile and vocabulary by chapter. You have to be a premium member to access this, but it's pretty cool. So it provides a separate Lexile measure for each chapter. And if you go over here, you can get vocabulary also, right? So if you click here, you can get the vocabulary for that particular chapter. There's a specific way that Metametrics selects the vocabulary words. The maximum number is 10. And in some cases, a word is not selected for a particular chapter because it doesn't meet the requirements. It has to be a word that is not typical for other books at this level. It has to be a harder vocabulary word than the level of the book, that kind of thing. But it's wonderful because you can click on the word, you can get the definitions, you can get a sample sentence, those kinds of things. So this can really shortcut a lot of the prep time for teachers if you need to go in there and access a book. Another thing I'm going to show you is the Lexile Analyzer. Again, you click on the card over here to access it. This allows you to input text and run the analyzer on a short piece of text. And you also can select vocabulary words from that text. Okay, so here is the home page. Before you use the analyzer, you must read the text preparation guidelines, because you could put gibberish in the analyzer. It will give you a number, but it won't be helpful to you. So you need to make sure that you are preparing the text correctly and it's edited correctly so that the measure you get out of it is meaningful and useful for your instruction, because that's the whole point of everything, right? So once you, and also we have a Spanish analyzer, so if you have Spanish text, you can do the same thing. So once you have your text properly prepared, you can click on the analyzer. So I have a text in here. Once you have your text, you get a Lexile range. It doesn't give a specific Lexile measure when you use the analyzer, but it gives you a range that could be useful for instructional purposes. And it also selects up to 10 words out of this, the piece of text that could be useful for instructional purposes. And again, you get a definition. It highlights the word in the text. So if you're planning on teaching a particular text, you can run it through the analyzer and just get a sense of how this text compares to the student's Lexile measures, if they're going to need some extra scaffolding and support when you're teaching it, that kind of thing. So it just gives you a heads up, and it helps identify some vocabulary words that you might want to teach. Like I said, we have a Spanish framework. I have this separate slide because I want to emphasize that this is a fabulous tool. Just like English, we don't have as many resources in the hub on Spanish quite yet. We're really working on this. But the Spanish and the English frameworks are completely separate. So a student takes a test of Spanish reading and gets matched with a book that has a Spanish Lexile Analyzer. You never cross frameworks. So you would never take an Aptis English assessment and match a student to a Spanish book. You would never take a Spanish assessment and get a Spanish reading comprehension Lexile measure and match that student to an English book. They don't mix and match. You have to stay within framework. All right, so that was very, very fast, but hopefully I gave you a sense of how you can use the Aptis score or other tests of reading. When we link to the Lexile framework for reading, it opens up a whole world, a lot of avenues for additional information that can help in your instructional planning and preparing for teaching and selecting texts that are best suited for the students that you have and the students' reading abilities in English and Spanish. If you want to reach me, there's my contact information, and I'd be happy to talk with you, especially if you're interested in doing a text demand study like the one we did in the United States and the UK and Korea, and we've done them in a number of other countries, but we'd like to expand into some large Spanish corpus as well. So I think that is my time for the presentation, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Okay, so thank you, Heather. Let's see, we have any questions from the audience. Nick Zimmer asked, are AWLs still used in these types of analysis?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. I was shifting my screen. Sorry. Can you repeat that again, please?
So question is, it starts that way, AWL is still used in these types of analysis?
Not for selecting the text difficulty, no.
Okay. Erica Charco Davis asked, with the free version, am I allowed to read the complete chapters of a book or only with the premium version?
With the premium version, the word limit is 1,000 words. With the free version, it's 250 words. With the free basic is 250 words. The basic plus registration, which is also free, is 500 words. The premium is 1,000 words. So if you have a text that is not in Find a Book, so in Find a Book, it's the whole book. It's every word in the whole book. Then I would suggest contacting the publisher and saying, hey, can you get a Lexile measure for this book? It's very, very, very cheap for publishers to get Lexile measures on their book. And then it would appear in Find a Book, the whole book, if there's something beyond 1,000 words. Or you can contact us. You can get access to the professional analyzer and measure. If you have a lot of books that you want to measure or a lot of text that you want to measure, that's an option too. I just didn't go into that because I honestly don't know the fee structure for that. But there are other ways to get measures for longer texts. So contact me and I can put you in touch with someone if you want to pursue that. But
okay. Thank you, Heather. Another question from Newton Paulo. He asked, what are the methods used in Lexile for readability? Example, Flesch, Kincaid, and Fry.
Actually, the Lexile measure replaces something like a Flesch-Kincaid text readability measure. So we have been working on the text measurement at Metametrics since 1984 and have been examining different text characteristics that affect the difficulty of the text. And actually, around 2010 to 2014, we did more work on lower level text, so down in the early reader ranges. And what we have in the Lexile Analyzers uses different variables than Flesch-Kincaid, different variables than Cometrics, for example, although there are a lot of overlapping variables with a system like text measurement from ETS or the Cometrics version. So we have 9 variables down low, and then we have a vocabulary and sentence variable that we use for the text at the higher levels. But it would replace a Flesch-Kincaid, and they don't use identical variables. The variables are not the same, but Flesch-Kincaid uses vocabulary and sentences also, and so does Metametrics. We just use different variables. So they're not identical.
Okay, and there is another question, but it's similar to the previous one. It says, do Lexile levels relate to other readability scales?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Do Lexile levels relate to other readability scales?
Yes, they do. They're very highly correlated with other readability measures. We have a research brief, actually, if anyone uses the Fountas and Pinnell text leveling system, maybe not here, but maybe bookworms, Oxford University Press bookworms. We have measured their text and have done a lot of studies with a lot of graded reader publishers, and they're very, very highly correlated.
Okay.
But not identically correlated, as you can see. I'm sorry to interrupt. As you can see from our the graded reader charts that I showed you, the Lexile measure of different books, they stair step up, so there's a very nice correlation there, but it's not identical. It's not a one-to-one correlation.
Okay, thank you. Erika says, the university where I work at uses Aptis, but once they have finished all their English courses. Do you recommend our university should ask students to take it as diagnostic instead at the end of all their English courses?
I'm not sure. What are they taking at the end of their English courses?
Aptis. They use Aptis and they take Aptis at the end of the English courses. The question is if you recommend that the university should take this test before the courses, like a diagnosis, or instead they should take the course at the end.
Thank you. Depends on how you're going to use the scores, but if you want to use them to help you understand the gaps between where the reader is and the materials that they're going to be reading, like I was showing you, then you would want to know that before they start their course. So it could be used at the beginning and at the end, perhaps. But if you have a sense of where your readers are in terms of their reading comprehension projections, you can forecast their likely comprehension of the books that you're going to be teaching. I also did want to come back. So it's up to you. It depends on how you want to use it. But I would say having that information with the Lexile measure up front can be very, very useful. Someone asked about AWL vocabulary earlier, and I was shifting gears a little bit. I do want to clarify that when in our Find a Book vocabulary selection tool, where you get the 10 words for chapter or 10 words by book, the AWL is one of the selection criteria for pulling those books out. It's one of many, but it is used in that feature, but it's not one of the variables used in determining the book's Lexile measure. So. Okay,
Heather, thank you very much. I think this is related to their first question. Nick Zimmer says that AWL is academic word list. So the question was, are academic word lists still using this type of analysis?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Don't worry.
My hearing is not all the best, to be perfectly honest.
So academic word lists, yeah? So are word academic lists still used in these types of analysis?
Yeah, and I also should say that I took a plane trip yesterday and my ears have not completely popped. So they are really plugged up. So I apologize for my, anyway, apologies. They are used in the vocabulary selection. Yes, definitely.
Okay. So, okay, so that's all the questions. Thank you, Heather. Thank you very much. Your presentation was very useful, and there were a lot of people who didn't know about this, so it's great. Thank you very much.
And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have more questions about the vocabulary or anything. So thank you.
Thank you.